What's the third of the 7 master steps? Number 3. Are you still with me? Good. You have to interrupt that person's pattern. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, think about it. Remember I said, if you know what people want and need, then all you have to do is figure out what's stopping them. What's stopping them is a pattern. It's a pattern of emotion. And whatever they're feeling is coming from a meaning they have. And that's coming from the way they're using their body, the way they're focusing, the language they use, the beliefs they have, right? That's what's shaping them. So we have to break the pattern. Now, I'll tell you a technique that I used when I did a lot of one-on-one therapy when I started my Impossibles practice. At the time, I just purchased a really wonderful home. It was called the Del Mar Castle. It was in Del Mar, California. And it was built from castles in Europe. And I was so proud to have this home. It was overlooking the ocean on the front, and it had this 3-story turret that I used to go up to on the outside and look down on the ocean on one side and over the mountains up the back side of the house. And I just loved it. And so I used to do private therapies there. And it was wonderful. People would fly in because they had this impossible challenge they worked on in therapists for years. And so now I was going to be their final approach because I guaranteed the result in one session. So they'd fly in and I would see them when they drove up the driveway because I'd be up on the 3rd story in the turret. And, when you came out of their car, they'd look at this house. It was a really neat place, very different. And, usually people would be curious or interested or think the house was really beautiful. And then my assistant would bring them up this winding stairway that went up all 3 stories to the top to where I was. And so, the person's focusing on things that are different, right? And what you focus on, you feel. They're feeling pretty good, probably. This is interesting. It's different. Their physiology, they're walking around, they're feeling good, right? Whatever language, they're curious. They're asking my assistant about pictures on the wall or about the house or where it come from or how it was built or how old it was. Just interesting things. So they're in a certain state. They come up, shake my hand, and then they'd sit down in the chair. And they'd say, well, I'm here because, and then they'd go into their pattern. They'd start to cry and talk about this was going on. And I'd wait just a few seconds till they really started to get into it. And all of a sudden I'd say, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I'd yell at them literally like this. And they'd jump. I said, we haven't started yet. How dare you? I haven't started. I haven't even asked you the questions yet. And then he'd go, oh, I'm sorry. And it was funny. This person who thinks they're out of control, the minute it wasn't appropriate, they knew how to change their pattern. It's like, have you ever been in the middle of a fight and you're arguing back and forth and then the phone rings and then the person who was just, and they pick up the phone, hello? And they're in a totally different state. They know how to change their state when they have to, when it's a must, when there's some leverage. That phone coming in is leverage. Get it? I'll tell you what I do to get leverage on that person. I interrupt their pattern, but I'll go back a step. They'd sit down, and I would, done my homework on them in advance. I knew a lot about them, but they'd sit down, and as they're starting to do this and they'd start to go in their state, I'd break their pattern, and I'd say, listen, I need to understand and appreciate more about what's going on with you. And when I was looking to get leverage, I did a couple of things. I would go in, and I would ask the person, I would say, look, I'm guaranteeing you a result here. And the result I'm guaranteeing you is in one session, we're going to create this change that you've been, struggling with for this, 7 years, 10 years? What is it? And they tell me. I'd say, I don't take clients that aren't totally committed to changing. I don't waste my time. So before we begin, you got to convince me before we start the session that we're going to have this session, that you truly are going to change. And they look at me like, are you crazy? I'd say, look, because I don't take clients that aren't going to change. And this person has flown from, let's say, New York to California, and they've rented a car, and they've come here. I got some leverage on their tail now. Do you follow me? And so now they got to convince me all the reasons. And you know what? Leverage comes from reasons. If you got strong enough reasons, you can change anything. Think about it. If you got a big enough why, you can figure out how to do just about anything in this world. So I'd get them to give me all these reasons. And the other way I'd get leverage is while they were there, I'd say, can you tell me a time in your life when you felt unstoppable? Can you tell me an area where you really felt successful? Can you tell me about a place where you broke through in a different area? And while they're doing this, I would create what's known as an anchor, a trigger, a conditioning tool that later on, if I needed to bring them back into a strong state, I had that leverage. I had a base to get them in a strong state with, and I had leverage to create change. I knew why change was a must for them, and I knew what state to put them in to get them strong. But as I went back to step 3, interrupting the pattern is so critical. I mean, I'll give you the most simplistic version of this. Have you ever had a situation where maybe you're feeling frustrated or upset and you had some obnoxious uncle or friend or somebody that kept interrupting you, and pretty soon they got you laughing. You didn't want to laugh, like you're crying or you're upset, and they kept breaking your pattern. They kept just interrupting you, and like you want to be upset. But you know what? If you interrupt somebody's pattern enough, they can't stay there anymore. Has that ever happened to you growing up or with a friend? I mean, think of it this way. We're all creatures of patterns. For you to be angry, you have to go in a certain way of using your body and your face, don't you? You have to focus on certain things to be angry in a certain way. You have to use a certain tone of voice, a certain language pattern to be angry. It's a different pattern than for you to be playful. There's a different tone of voice, isn't there? A different posture, a different gesture. Do you use your face different when you're being playful? Of course you do. Do you focus on things differently when you're playful? Of course you do. Is there different language patterns of what you say or how you say it when you're in a playful state? Of course. So whatever people want to change, they want to move from a state they don't like to a state they do want. They might say, I want to stop smoking, or I want to lose weight, or I want to whatever. But they only want to stop smoking or lose weight because they think it's going to lead to a feeling. That if I stop smoking, then, I'll feel better, I'll have more health or more energy. Or if I lose weight, then I'll be more attractive to other people. That's a feeling. So my view is all change is changing feelings, changing the pattern of emotion. To do that, all I got to do is break up the pattern of meaning. Break up those 3 molders of meaning, what you do with your body, what you do with your focus, what you do with your language. If I want to make a long-term change, I just got to change your blueprint a bit. And the only way you're going to change it is if you, number 1, understand their world. Number 2, you got lots of leverage, where change is a must. And number 3, keep breaking the old pattern. Here's the principle. Listen to me now and hear this. The biggest reason people fail to change, other than not having enough leverage, is that they try to create a new pattern before they first interrupt the old pattern. Here's what I mean. If you want to get yourself to stop smoking, you're going to have to replace smoking with something else. But first, you got to make it difficult to smoke. You got to break that pattern. It's so ingrained in your nervous system. So think of it this way. When you get in the habit, I used to bite my fingernails, but it was an unconscious habit. And I did it no matter what. It kept coming up. I even wanted to change it because it was ugly. It was terrible. And I would get it where I'd bite all my fingernails off and there was nothing left. And I'd still bite unconsciously. And I'd end up getting those where you bite the quick. And it would bleed, and then it would heal back, and I have like these little scabs. I mean, it was horrible. So, I went to the store, and I went to the pharmacy, and they had the stuff you could put on your fingernails that if you brought it up to your mouth, it tasted horrible. So that would supposedly break the pattern. I still did it. That's how bad it was. But what changed my life was one day I got enough leverage. I saw this woman. I was starting a new business with her. She was a client, and it was early in my career. I was working for this company in marketing, and she was the buyer on the other side. And I'll never forget. I thought when I walked in that day, this woman is beautiful. I mean, physically, mentally, emotionally. She had this angelic feel about her and very, very sexy lady. And I thought, man, I'd like to make 2 sales today. One is the product and the other is me. I want to connect with this woman. I was, whatever age, 19, 20 years old, whatever it was. And so sure enough, everything's going well on both sales, it looks like, as we went through the lunchtime. And at the end, I said, what do you think? And she said, absolutely, let's do it. And she wanted the product, so I went to go hand her the contract. I'll never forget. She grabbed my hand. I pulled it back instinctively, and she goes, what is that? Let me see your hands. And I was like, oh, what? She goes, let me see your hands. And so I brought my hands out, and she saw my fingernails, and she said, that is disgusting. I said, well, I just kind of have this habit of biting my fingernails, and it's just a bad habit. She goes, no, that's not just a bad habit. That is disgusting. She said, I could never do business with a person with that little discipline. And she got up, and she stormed out. And I thought, that woman is not an angel. I think I thought something much more harsh than that, actually, but that will be my coded way of describing it to you. All I can tell you is, it bugged me, though, because, man, she was leverage. Man, I really wanted her, and this stupid pattern of biting my fingernails is getting in the way. Nothing had leveraged me like that before. I said, you know what? This fingernail thing is done. I'm finding a way. I got higher value, connection and love, baby. Right? So sure enough, man, I got all these different books out, and I found this conditioning tool called a swish pattern. I'll never forget. And what I did is I saw my fingers coming up to my mouth, and then physically I would pull it back. I would snap it back, and then I would see myself as this successful person as I snapped it back. I would link these positive feelings. In those days, I was a kid, so I grew up poor, so I thought, okay, successful, I got this cool suit on and a nice watch and ring, and I am the man, or some stupid thing like that, whatever my model of the world was back then at 19. And so sure enough, I did it like 20 times. Like train the brain, see this, boom, do that, see this, boom, do that. And I did it over and over again. It was a conditioning technique, standard Skinner kind of stuff. And I'll never forget from this movie, and it's a really intense movie, and I really get into movies, and sure enough, next thing I know, my fingers are at my lips, and I'm about to bite down. But instead of going, this stuff doesn't work, I just realized, you know what I got to do? I got to condition it some more. And so I did. I did it a bunch more times. I don't know, for the next 5 days, maybe I did 20, 25 of these little swish patterns again and again, and then I've never touched my fingernails again. Now, things didn't quite work out perfectly with the girl, but you know what? It served its purpose. It gave me leverage, and it broke my pattern. I mean, when she looked at my fingers and said, that is disgusting, she got leverage on me and broke my pattern simultaneously. Does that make sense? Now, when you scratch the old pattern out, when you break it, you're open to something new. See, that's the only way it's going to happen. You're not going to change things without breaking the old pattern. Think of it like a record. I use this example a lot. I'll repeat it, I'm sure, tomorrow and the next day, because this is it. Most people today have their music digitally, but in the good old days, we used to get it on CDs, or if you're really ancient, vinyl LPs. Ooh. And you know what's interesting? Think about this. Why every time you listen to a CD do you hear the same music? Because there's a pattern on there. A pattern that when the laser goes across it, it triggers the same response every time. If I try to put a new CD in, a new thought, a new belief, a new feeling, a new kind of music in your head, and I try to put it on top of a CD that's already there, I'm not going to influence you. I'm not going to create any change. But if I take out your old CD and take out a needle, scratch it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth 100 times, you put that CD in, it's never going to play the same way again. Just like your uncle grabbing you, making you crazy, or making you laugh when you didn't want to, after a while, you can't go back to the old pattern. That's a critical tool. There are many ways to break people's patterns. You can break their pattern physically. Suddenly you tease them, tickle them, kiss them, water gets dropped on somebody. Somebody is all depressed and you drop water on them. I promise you, they won't be depressed anymore. They get angry, they get excited, but something's going to change. You can break the pattern of their focus. They keep focusing on the past. You take them to the future and create a new view. I remember one time in my life, I was in this horrible place, and one of my dear friends told me, I'll never forget, he said, Tony, you think this problem will never go away. But he said, you're wrong. You know, there'll be a few years from now, you'll be on this stuff. He said, you'll be here, you'll be married, you'll be with this woman you totally love. He said, we'll be together and we'll talk about these days and how crazy and difficult it seemed. And he broke my pattern. He got me to change my focus to the future instead of thinking this moment is forever. Because when people are in pain, they think that, don't they? Or you can change people's language. You know, somebody says, oh, this is the worst thing that ever happened. I remember this one woman was talking to me one time, and I was doing therapy on her. She's a very famous lady, and she was overseas and completely depressed and unable to eat and going through all these things. And, you know, I understood where she was. And at one point, I just said, you know what? You need to do something different here. We need an alternative to your old language pattern here. I'm going to give you something else to say. And I broke her pattern completely. I said, here's what I want you to do. Next time you start to feel depressed and you start saying no one loves me and my career is in shambles because I haven't made a movie in 3 years and all this stuff, I said, I want you to do this. You're hanging out on the beach. You're talking to me by phone from where? From Cannes, from the south of France. Okay, so here's what I want you to repeat. I want you to do this 20 times a day. Thank God I'm not a cockroach in Bulgaria. And, you know, just did something stupid. Come on, say it. Thank God I'm not a cockroach in Bulgaria. All I did was keep changing her phrase, and I kept her saying, say it louder. God, I'm not a cockroach. She's like, what are you talking about? I said, it doesn't matter. Keep saying it. And what it did is it changed her language. It changed her focus. It changed her body. It broke her pattern. Right? It shifted it all.